Look how blonde you are.
I know, it's crazy, huh?
You look great.
Really? Thank
Really
you.
fresh and young and pretty.
You.
I mean, you're always pretty and young. That's why I keep telling the kids, I'm like, she's young. You'll love her because she's so young. And that's funny. You look
Yeah.
great.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
How have you been?
Good. How about you?
Good, really good. Getting ready for spring break and
Oh yeah, when is that?
so we have next week and then we're on spring break, so it'll be nice.
Oh, okay. That will be.
I've been pushing out and talking to my kids and posted in Google Classroom and really promoting that camp on the 15th and 16th. So hopefully we'll conjure up some great kids that want to go. And then tomorrow I'm going to remember, because I always forget, I'm going to remember to bring down those. I printed out the registration information packet and I'm going to bring them down to Senator Square for the kids and give them to those kids that were there last year.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, that'll be great.
Yep.
Yay. I know. I hope we get a good amount of kids.
So do you think there'll be kids there from like Vegas and Elko and Douglas and Washoe, or what do you think?
So each county is doing their own like thing.
Oh.
Yeah. So the keynotes are going to be like Zoom and everyone will be together essentially, but then each county is doing their own different thing. Okay. So it'll just be all Carson kids.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I know I had 2 kids there last year that was a part of the club and they keep asking me, when's the club going to start? I'm like, really, honestly, like there are no clubs this year right now going on. And I said, next year for sure. I said, but there's this workshop and I saw him today because I keep saying, come up to my room and I'll give you, but I have to bring him at lunch. So I just bring him at lunch and hand him out.
Who were the ones who wanted to know about the camp? Who went last year?
Her name was Corey. She plays softball. Yeah, long, and she always had blue hair.
Yes, yeah.
Blondish blue. And then Ashley is the other girl. I can't remember their last names. Been a bit.
I know like that whole like friend group though. There was like a group of like 3 or 4 of them, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
They both ask me, I'm like, every time they see me, when are we gonna meet? I'm like, next year.
I know, right? I mean, you can always send them to me. Like we can always like do fun activities if they just want to like do something,
Yeah. And same with Isabella Kaufman. She's a freshman this year. Yeah, she'd be great.
Yes, she seems so smart.
So I'm gonna let these kids in or people. I have my filters on.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I made you co-host.
Yeah.
And then Diana's gonna hop on. And then I think I fixed the chat.
Cool.
To host only. Yep. Perfect.
Cool.
I'm excited for this presentation.
I know, me too.
I was like, this topic always brings like in a lot of questions. And so I was like, I'm prepared.
I know. I love it. I think it's great. We just did a marijuana web quest in class. And we have our unit test next week. I'm like, this will be perfect. You need this information.
Yeah.
So, Eric Parker, Bridget, Jaden. Oh, Jaden LaPlante. So good. Different people for sure. Peyton.
Yeah.
Philip. Rustin. Man, some of these kids have come to many of them.
Yeah, I like recognize the names.
Yeah. Cheyenne.
Oh.
Partnership Carson City, all that in, you think?
Yeah, that's Diana.
Yeah. That's what I figured.
And then I'll go ahead and make her a host. Let's see.
Don't know who this NHHVM2 is, so I'm not admitting them.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Okay.
All right, you guys, it is 6 o'clock. So because you're here on time, I will reward you with getting going right away. Tonight's family engagement series is on marijuana dangers, and our host is Partnership Carson City. So we would like them to thank them for hosting all these family engagement series and allowing us to learn a little bit more about substance abuse and hopefully prevent the use with the knowledge that we gain. So tonight's is on marijuana, and our presenter is Samantha Szoyka. She also is the youth coordinator, and she does the youth group or club that we do at the high school. It's called Represent. And we'll get going with that next year again, once we have in-person learning and regular school, and we allow people to come in and do our clubs with us and partner with them in doing activities in the community. So hopefully you have questions tonight about marijuana, the dangers of marijuana, the laws surrounding marijuana. She is like the expert. Like, she does all these classes and all these trainings and everything. And she's like so super smart. And so I want to turn the host duties over to her and let her start educating you on marijuana, the laws, the dangers, and all that. So if you have any questions, I would rather you guys have your cameras on so that we can see you and know that you're actually there. And it just makes it like a little bit more professional and intimate when you guys are like people instead of black screens, because it sucks presenting to a black screen. So anyway, without further ado, I will turn it over to Samantha. So yay.
Thank you. All right, guys, how are you all tonight? You can give me a thumbs up. Sweet. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to introduce myself, and we're going to jump right in. Okay. So like Miss Bean said, my name is Samantha Szoyka. I'm the youth program coordinator for Partnership Carson City. And then tonight we're going to talk about myths and facts around marijuana, cannabis, pretty much everything related to it. And we're going to cover everything from data, national studies, the laws surrounding it, CBD, everything. So hopefully I can answer any questions that you have in the slides, but I really hope that you guys ask questions at the end, because I know that this is a topic that a lot of people have questions about. And so that's why I'm here. I just want to start by saying what Partnership Carson City is. So Partnership Carson City, we're a substance abuse prevention and education coalition or nonprofit that focuses on educating the community and fostering a healthy environment. So we're a nonprofit here. We are here to educate you. What I do as the youth person is I get to work with all of you guys in the community to educate you guys to come up with different alternative activities so that you guys aren't out on the streets, maybe being peer pressured, giving you guys all the coping skills that you might need, not only to say no to drugs, but to also just live like a healthy life. So here are some learning objectives. At the end of this presentation, you should be able to know all of these things. So you should be able to recognize the difference between marijuana, cannabis, and CBD. You should be able to recognize the effects that marijuana and cannabis products have on the body. You should be able to recognize the effects of long-term marijuana use. And then you should also be able to acknowledge the laws regarding cannabis and products in Nevada. What exactly is cannabis when we talk about it? I know a lot of times we use marijuana and cannabis synonymously, but cannabis is actually an umbrella blanket term used for marijuana and hemp products. So all marijuana plants are cannabis, but not all cannabis plants are marijuana. And I know that's a little confusing, but we're going to jump into the differences, right? So you have your hemp and you have your marijuana. You have your two things that are blanketed underneath the entire word cannabis. So hemp plants are defined as a cannabis plant that contains 0.3% or less of THC. Marijuana plants are defined as a cannabis plant that contains more than 0.3% of THC. So I know you guys have probably seen things like clothing that is made with hemp, or hemp-based lotions, or maybe hemp-based shampoos, all of that, right? So those aren't the products that are going to be getting you high. It's just a form of a plant of cannabis that doesn't contain a lot of THC, or very, very fine, small amounts of it. The marijuana plants are the ones that are the typical marijuana things that you see. Those are the plants that are going to contain the high amounts of THC that we think of when we associate with marijuana. With modern day marijuana products, we have seen THC levels as high as in the 90 percentiles. So we're also going to talk about that at the end too, of the progression of how potency in marijuana has changed drastically since the 70s till now. Because I know that we all think, oh, our parents may have used it, or grandparents, or, we've seen all of this stuff of marijuana being, very like accepted in the 70s. But the marijuana that was produced back then is so much different than the marijuana that's being produced now. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about laws and dispensaries and why exactly the potency is like that. So when we talk about the components in cannabis plants, there's two main components. And I'm going to apologize because these words are very big words and I might slaughter them. So the first one is the cannabidiol. So that's your CBD. And the other one is the tetrahydrocannabinol. That one is the THC, right? So you have your CBD and your THC, which are the two components in cannabis products. Both compounds interact with your body's endocannabinoid system, but they have very different effects. So THC, we know, is that primary component that produces the high sensation that we associate with marijuana. That psychoactive thing that happens in our body when THC is introduced into our body. CBD also, though, does produce a psychoactive sensation, but it's not anywhere close to the same manner as THC. So CBD products come in many forms, just like marijuana products. They come in, edibles. They can come in liquids like tinctures. They can come in vape pens. They can come in pretty much any single form that marijuana products typically come in as well. CBD products are illegal to possess or purchase by anyone under the age of 21. I know that also is a little confusing too, because if CBD doesn't contain THC, then why would someone have to be 21 to purchase it? Well, since CBD again falls under that umbrella of a cannabis product, anything cannabis is 21 years or older. So think of it just like alcohol, right? Like wine coolers where they have maybe like the smallest amount of alcohol, you still have to be 21 to purchase those, because it is associated and it does have some form of cannabis in that.
Yes, why?
Let's see. Perfect. So like marijuana, CBD is stored in the fat cells in the body, which means CBD can stay in the body for periods of time, just like marijuana. So I don't know if you guys know, but when you do smoke marijuana products, all of that is stored in the fat cells of the body. And so that's why it takes longer amounts of time for marijuana to get out of your system. So typically about 30 to 45 days, even up to 3 months. So since CBD is also stored in the fat cells like marijuana, this means that it can show up on drug tests since it is a cannabis product.
That's what I was going to ask. If so, it's stored in the body. You said up to maybe 35 days. So if you smoke or do marijuana and have that CBD oil stored in your body, 30 days later, you can still do a drug test and test positive?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's kind of like the general rule of thumb is about 30 days. It also depends, on how much you're consuming, your height and weight, if you're a man or a woman, just kind of like how alcohol affects genders differently. but the typical rule of thumb is 30 days is how long cannabis products will stay in your body. Again, I know with like drug tests and everything like that, especially with the legalization and the accessibility towards youth, they have started using more drug tests that are cannabis based instead of just marijuana based. So marijuana based drug tests can only detect THC levels, but with a cannabis drug test, which are becoming more popular, they can also detect CBD levels as well too. So these are different methods of use for any sort of cannabis. So smoking or inhalation, that could also include vaping as well. Ingesting it, so using edibles, whether that be gummies or anything like that, your brownies, and then topicals. So any sort of liquids, tinctures, lotions, anything like that. The dispensary in the cannabis industry has gotten very creative on how they can infuse cannabis into basically any form or method of use. So these are the physical effects of marijuana use. And then we're going to break these down one by one to see exactly how it affects. But these are just a couple things. So first and foremost, it affects the respiratory system the most, because when people are using marijuana, it's typically by smoking it or vaping it. So that can cause coughing, wheezing, lung and mouth cancer, dry mouth, etc. The sensation of where I forgot like the actual term for it, but when you have like phlegm in your throat from smoking it too much, that can be another respiratory physical effect. Your pulmonary, so your heart rate and all of that, you can have an increased heart rate. It decreases your blood pressure. And then also your digestive system. So since it is stored in the body, and then depending on how you are using marijuana, it is metabolized in the body and also in the liver as well. So when you look at the respiratory system, when marijuana is smoked / inhaled in the respiratory system, it's one of the most affected systems in the body. Like I said, the number one way that we see that youth are using marijuana is by smoking, inhaling it, vaping, you name it. Your lungs are filters that take in everything you breathe and filter out the bad stuff while keeping the oxygen. When marijuana is inhaled, the lungs must work overtime to filter out all the chemicals. And I know that a common question that we see when we talk about vaping versus marijuana, which is better? Typically, people think that marijuana being vaped is better because it's marketed as natural versus vaping has all these harsh chemicals. But the truth of the matter is, no matter what you're putting into your lungs, if it's not oxygen, your lungs are still going to have to work overtime to filter out everything that's bad in there. So I wouldn't say that there's one or other that's better per se. I would say that both of them are equally as bad because you are still putting that in your lungs. And so the only true way to keep your lungs and your respiratory system in check is to not smoke anything at all. Your digestive system, and just like the respiratory system, the digestive system filters what we consume. So with marijuana ingestion, the liver takes on a lot of additional chemicals to process it. So just like I was talking about with lungs, how they have to work overtime to filter out all that bad stuff. Well, if your body is metabolizing the marijuana because you're eating it in edible form, your liver has to also produce a lot of extra chemicals and work overtime to process that to get it out of your system. Think of it the same way as alcohol, right? So we know about cirrhosis of the liver. If someone's drinking too much, their liver's working overtime. It's just the same way with marijuana too. Your body is going to be affected in all different forms. And then your pulmonary system. So marijuana can actually increase the heart rate by 20 to 50 beats per minute, which can lead to an increased risk to heart attacks. The THC also reduces blood pressure, which can cause dizziness leading to fainting or passing out. So you kind of have that weird balance, right? So your heart rate's going up and maybe your heart rate's now 140, right? And then now, but your blood pressure is being reduced. So now you're feeling dizziness and fainting or passing out. Using marijuana products also increases the chances of having an anxiety or panic attack. So these are just two graphs here where you can see more of what parts of the body that marijuana affects. So on the left side, you can see in the brain that there's problems with learning, memory, reaction time, sleeping. And we're going to talk more about the psychological effects too. Cancer of the mouth and lungs, respiratory problems. It actually stunts fertility, so you can have premature birth, less oxygen to the fetus. You can have a low birth rate while using marijuana while pregnant. And then again, like the mental illness part of it too. So panic, anxiety, depression, paranoia, lack of motivation, right? That couch lock sensation, dry mouth, tooth decay, bad breath, weight gain, all of that. And then if you look at the one on the right, this one, which we'll talk about more, is basically how your brain processes things when you are using marijuana. So, you know, it's going to send all the signals to your stomach, giving you that munchy feeling, right? That's where the weight gain can come on. So within minutes of just inhaling, your heart rate can immediately increase within the first 20 minutes. It can make you feel anxious and panicky. And then it also touches on the dopamine receptor in the brain, which is the thing that makes you feel happy and euphoric, which is also when you use substances, all of those chemicals act on the same receptor of dopamine. And that is how the vicious cycle of addiction begins. So when we talk about the psychological effects, there's trouble with short-term and long-term memory. It impairs your thinking and your learning functions. You can develop mental health disorders such as anxiety and depression. And lastly, addiction. So memory and marijuana. So research has shown that, why can't I see my notes? Sorry, I had to move my little thing. Research has shown that problems with attention, memory, and learning can last for several days and weeks after ceasing to use marijuana. Consistent use of marijuana can increase the length of time it takes for someone to regain complete abilities of mental functioning, as it takes longer to get out of their system. So talking about how it stays in your system, right? And I said that general rule about 30 days. Well, like I said, it also is contingent on how much you're using, how often you're using. So if you're using marijuana every single day, maybe multiple times a day, it's going to take longer for your memory and all of your mental abilities to get back to 100% versus if you either quit using or are not using at all. And that also goes for your learning, short-term and long-term memory. So if you guys are using for extended periods of time, maybe years and years, your short-term and your long-term memory are both affected by that. It's not just the little things where you're using marijuana and you forget something. You're going to see these effects in the long run, and hopefully you don't see those effects in the long run because you don't use. So marijuana usage has been linked to considerably poor habits when it comes to education. Studies done in New Zealand and with Duke University show that students who used marijuana have a significantly lower chance of finishing high school or committing to college. These students also have a much higher chance of developing an addiction, turning to other drugs, and more suicide attempts. I know also a popular thing that everyone says is marijuana is a gateway drug. And whether or not we believe that or not, typically when someone starts abusing drugs, whether it be alcohol, whether it be marijuana, typically people aren't going for the hardcore per se drugs right away, right? These ones are the ones that have been around for the longest, so they might seem like the safest. But when you do start falling into that addiction, and when you do start using more often, that you need to use more for your dopamine levels to reach that, then you might have to turn to other things. And that's where the vicious cycle of addiction comes in. So mental illness and marijuana. So marijuana use can increase someone's mental health symptoms, or can even increase the likelihood that someone will suffer from a mental illness. So if someone already is suffering from depression or anxiety or schizophrenia, those symptoms are just going to be heightened with the paranoia and everything that comes with that from marijuana, and then coming down from that high, right? Like you're just like with everything else, you're getting your dopamine levels up very high, and then you're going to come off that crash. Your depression symptoms can be a lot stronger than they were. Common mental illnesses associated with marijuana can include temporary hallucinations, temporary paranoia, and suicidal thoughts. And those suffering from schizophrenia may have heightened symptoms when using marijuana. So there have been a couple other studies with Duke University as well, that people with schizophrenia, their hallucinations and delusions were just so far-fetched and just so debilitating that it caused suicidal thoughts in people. So those who began using marijuana in their adolescent years have an increased risk of becoming addicted. This goes for any sort of drug and alcohol as well. Roughly 17%, 1 in 6 of youth become addicted to marijuana nationally. Withdrawal symptoms can occur, which can look like insomnia, irritability, decreased appetite, and drug cravings. And those are just a couple of the many of withdrawal symptoms that we see. These are a couple cool studies that I saw from the National Institute of Drug Abuse. And I found these really fascinating because, again, these are the ones from New Zealand with help from Duke. This one said that they showed that people who started smoking marijuana heavily in their teens and had an ongoing marijuana use disorder lost an average of 8 IQ points between ages 13 and 38. Those that quit using marijuana as an adult generally did not get back those lost mental abilities. So I know it might seem like, oh, 13 to 38, what if I stop smoking when I am 25 or when I'm 30 or when I'm 19, right? Well, I mean, those are just a ballpark age, but I think that it's really telling that if someone is going to start using marijuana at that age, it could possibly fall into addiction and bring that use into adulthood. And 8 IQ points is a lot. There's another study, this one again, this one was with the FDA. This one was more of a recent one, and this one is kind of geared towards vaping, but it also has the marijuana component. So the FDA has been alerting the public in the most recent years of hundreds of reports of serious lung illnesses associated with vaping, including death. Upon investigation of these products, they found that often the liquid inside the vapes have been mixed with THC. There has not been conclusion that one single compound has caused these issues. So now until the FDA has advised against using any form of electronic cigarette or modifying any purchased products. So I know you guys had vaping last week, and yeah, there's so many different things with vapes and everything, and there's so many different forms. And there has been a lot of deaths and a lot of lung illnesses recently. Vapes have been around for a while, but not as long as cigarettes. So they're still finding out all of the dangers of vaping. I'm sure that there's a lot more than they've already uncovered, but we are seeing a trend now that the vapes that you can add your own liquid to, that youth are mixing THC liquid with that as well too. So now you're mixing a stimulant with a hallucinogen, and it's you're just using 2 different drugs at the same time.
You know, that's really funny that you said that and presented that, because we just watched a class video in class today about, or this week about vaping and how there is no long-term research. And I talked about like tobacco's been around like for thousands of years, you know, it's 2020. It's been used in the 1600s and the 1700s. And now it's just, I mean, there's a lot of research and data accumulated over those years. And I said, vaping, 10 years, that's it. Like my son, he's doing his master's program and he's making these mice vape, and he's studying the effects of vape on lungs. And I'm like, how coincidental is that I'm teaching it? And it's just so new, but I can't believe they're doing THC in their vape pens. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, and definitely. And like you were saying, you know, like they've been around for not that long. So like, I'm sure that there's way more effects that we don't even know about or won't even know about until like hundreds of years from now.
Yeah.
But all the THC and I mentioned earlier, the CBD products too, they make CBD products and THC products just for vape pens. And it's literally just the juice and you can add it to your vape pens. Don't get excited because it's still illegal if you're under 21. But these are the things. And, you know, tobacco is a stimulant and marijuana is actually a hallucinogen. And so you're mixing these two different chemicals, and you know, the milligrams and everything that they advertise on it and the way you mix it, you don't know how much you're actually consuming, and you don't know how many milligrams of what and what you're mixing in there too.
Yeah.
So kind of a scary combo.
The other thing too with that is like just before COVID and the lockdown, like that summer prior to that March happening last year, there were a bunch of serious cases among teens. They were going to college, their parents were driving them to college for their first year of school, and they were moving in, and they had vaped the night before with their friends to party, you know, like I'm leaving. And they wound up in the hospital 24 hours later with some serious lung conditions that were on ventilators and almost died because they vaped. And I'm sure like there was fluid sitting in the bottom of their lungs, like oil, you know, and that's super dangerous. So just so you guys are aware, it happens.
Yeah. And that's also a good point too, because it's almost kind of like with alcohol. So, you know, if you consume a lot of alcohol the next morning, if you go to drive, you could still blow like a 0.08 or a point whatever, you know, depending on how much your body has metabolized it. So since marijuana works in the same way that your body has to metabolize it, if you do smoke marijuana or use marijuana the night before and you go to drive the next day, just be advised that you could still get pulled over and still come up for driving under the influence of marijuana. So this is some local data that I pulled. This is from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, the YRBS. And this is a study that has been done for the whole state of Nevada and then for each county as well too. I know that in the last presentations that Susie has pulled some of this data too. So I wanted to look at some of the data for marijuana on it. So for the state of Nevada, 35% of high school students have ever tried marijuana in their entire lives. For Carson City, that number is 48% that have ever tried. So we are a lot higher than a lot of the other counties, and we're one of the highest in the state for ever trying. 6.9% of those youth that have tried marijuana for the first time before the age of 13. So almost 7% of these youth have tried it before the age of 13, which is kind of crazy because, you know, that's like beginning of middle school, right? Getting out of elementary school. And in the last 30 days before taking the survey, 30.3% of Carson City youth had used marijuana. More than half of Carson City youth say that smoking or inhaling marijuana is the typical method of use. I think this one was about 55%. So that's pretty normal of what we're seeing is that's the most common way that youth are using. And that's probably because that's the easiest way for them to acquire the marijuana. Dabbing and wax concentrate usage was also on the higher spectrum for method of use. So dabs and wax were number 2. So smoking was number 1 of the method of use, and then dabbing and wax. And dabbing and wax, that one is also tricky because those ones do have a very, very, very high concentrate of THC. So if you don't really know how much your body can take if you are using dabs or wax, especially if you don't know where you're getting it from, how much you're using, anything like that. 23% or 23.7% of Carson City youth report riding in a car with someone who was under the influence of marijuana. So that's pretty scary too, because I feel like that number is pretty high for youth to be riding around with someone who's under the influence. And just because it's marijuana, people might think it's safer than driving drunk, but you can still get a DUI for marijuana, and it's still very highly dangerous to drive. And it's still illegal to drive under the influence of marijuana, even if you are over the age of 21.
So a question came up in class, and I just wanted to throw it out here in this forum is, so we know that alcohol, the age is 21, drinking and driving, the legal limit is 0.08.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like same kind of like, if a cop stops you and you're under the influence of marijuana, is there a test they do? Is it similar to the one of alcohol? And how do they, what is the limit? You know, like, is there a legal limit kind of thing on marijuana, or do they just say you're under the influence and they take you in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So they do have a test. I don't know if they use any other tests, but the one test I'm aware of is a swab test. So they'll just swab the inside of your mouth, and then they have tests where they can immediately check. Because no matter how you're using it, even if you're using edibles or smoking it, it's still going to be on the inside of your mouth. So that's at least like the way that I know. I don't know if they have more tests. And then the other one, that one is a very tricky question because so marijuana affects everyone so differently. So, and it also depends how long you've been using, of how much it has in your body. So for example, if you used marijuana one time 7 days ago and you were to drug test 7 days later, you would tell by how many milligrams you have in your system the last time that you used. So they haven't actually pinpointed an exact amount of THC that you can have in your system that's safe, because they haven't perfected the test to tell how much milligrams you've had in your system. So they can say, oh, she has 0.00004 milligrams in her system. She was not driving under the influence she had used previously. I know that they were talking about in last Nevada legislature of finding like a number like a 0.08 to just kind of give them like an overall idea until they figure out, you know, a better way of doing this. But I don't believe that they got to that bill, and I don't believe that they're tabling it this legislature, but it is something that they are working on to find, you know, like the golden number of 0.08. But I don't believe right now they have that, but I do know that they have a way to test for it and to see if you actually are actively used last night, or find out when the last time you used was.
Cool.
Yeah, that was a good question.
And the,
yeah.
one other question that came up with our discussion in class was, are the penalties the same for driving under the influence of alcohol versus driving under the influence of drugs?
That's
no,
also,
I mean, it might be a police
yeah.
question we asked, not you.
Right. That one, I don't know too much if it's like like a difference. I will say that most of the arrests that I hear from the police is when they do pull over someone for driving high, that they usually get a higher sentence because they usually have this stuff on them. So they'll have, you know, their pipe, or they'll have any sort of products with them. And that's usually what hurts them, because not only are they getting a DUI, but then they also have the products on them. And so that's kind of what gets them the higher sentence in that. If they were just driving completely under the influence and didn't have any sort of things with them, that might be a different story. But I don't know like legalities of like, you know, like I think it all just also depends too, if it's like your first offense, second offense, how old you are, how high or drunk you are, all of that too. I think it's all kind of contingent on use. But that's a really good question too. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier when we talk about the marijuana from our parents' age all the way to marijuana now. We can see all the way from 1995 all the way up to 2018. So this is just showing you the percentage And I also want to preface this by saying this is a percentage of natural THC in naturally grown products. Dispensary products are a little bit different, and we'll talk about that. So you'll see from 1995 to 2018, about a 23-year time gap, right? It went up over 12% in THC. And then on the right side, you can see here that you can see in the green, the CBD levels too. So those have kind of fluctuated, but the main component that we're looking at is the THC potency. And so also what I want to talk about briefly about what I mean, the difference between dispensary marijuana and natural grown marijuana, is dispensaries have found out ways to chemically alter the marijuana to have higher concentrates of THC. So products in dispensaries, they're made in factories. They can add the additives to it. They add the flavors, right? This is where they make everything. So they're making the edibles, they're making the vape pens, they're just growing the loose leaf flower, all of that. But they have ways to chemically alter it and put more THC, more CBD, all of that in. So this is what this graph is what I'm talking about when we talk about like the naturally grown, not touched by dispensary marijuana. And this graph is a little bit blurry. I apologize, it was really small, but this one is just another graph to show you from 1970, and this one goes all the way up to 2020. So at the end of 2020, we were at about 15.5% of potency in marijuana products, versus in the 1970s, they were about 1% potent.
And the more potent the marijuana is, or the THC in the marijuana, the bigger the effect on the brain and the body.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So the higher the potency, the bigger the effect. And it also you'll also need to use less product to get the desired effect. So if someone is smoking an entire bowl of marijuana that is from 2020 versus in 1970, you're going to see a very big difference on the way it affects you.
So is this causing a greater addiction level and addiction rate among people because they're getting the higher THC levels, therefore they're becoming more dependent on that dopamine and the reward circuit?
Yeah. And so I think a lot of what we see with the youth is, they're just using they're using these products like they normally would. And with the potency of it being so high, when you start to feel that you're not getting the same high that you were before, you're going to start to need higher doses of it. You're going to start to be using more of it to get the desired effect. And so that's how it starts spiraling into an addiction, that you need more and more and more to achieve the level of happiness that your brain is telling you that you're getting from this drug.
That's sad. That's really sad.
It's crazy. When I saw these graphs, I was like, wow, I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was like that crazy. Okay. And we're going to move into talking about recreational and medical marijuana. So this is just a map of all the states. You'll see they're in the green where they have legalized recreational and medical marijuana. The states that are blue have legalized medical marijuana. And then all the states that are gray, they do not have legalized medical or recreational marijuana. And you'll see kind of that trend on the West Coast there, that you see that we have more of the recreational and the medical, and then you'll see more spread out that it's just the medical marijuana. So we always hear the thing like, but it's legal, right? Well, only 15 states have legalized recreational marijuana. So 15 out of 50. 39 states have legalized medical marijuana. Some states have both, but marijuana is still federally illegal. So while, yes, it is legal recreationally and medically in the state of Nevada, if the federal government came to Nevada or something to do a drug bust on marijuana, you would still be tried because it is a federal offense, because marijuana is not federally legal. So recreational versus medical. So recreational means that any person that is of the legal age with a valid ID may purchase marijuana and cannabis products from a licensed dispensary only. Medical marijuana means that someone was medically approved through a licensed doctor to purchase marijuana products from a dispensary for some sort of medical purpose. Typically, these patients that have the medical marijuana cards have chronic pain, terminal illnesses, everything like that.
So when you say of legal age, when you're saying recreational of legal age, you can go into a dispensary and purchase that. Legal age meaning 21?
Yes, 21.
Okay. And then medical marijuana, if they are 15 and they got in a car accident and seriously injured or have some major surgery, can a doctor prescribe the 15-year-old medical marijuana to go in and buy it, or do they prescribe it to the parent?
So to my understanding is I believe that the 15-year-old would get the medical marijuana card, but they would not be allowed to go into the dispensary without their parent or guardian who's 21 and over. Yeah, so they would have to still be accompanied by a parent or guardian who's 21, because I know there have been some cases where there's been like teenagers and stuff like that who are maybe suffering from cancer or terminal illness, but they still have to have their adult with them to go purchase the products. And then another note that I also found really interesting from the Cannabis Board is, they do very valid ID checks. They scan your ID, they take down your name, they write down how much you have purchased that week, because there are laws on how much you can purchase. And then they also write in your file back to what dispensary you bought it from and which person you bought it from. So if for any reason there was an adult buying these products, they were distributing them to youth, maybe the youth got into a car accident, they have a way to track it back all the way down to the person at the dispensary who sold. So they have like a very, very secure system in there in place. So medical marijuana, while it is becoming more legalized and more talked about, it's still a drug that has addictive purposes and poses physical and psychological problems. So before I get to the next slide, I just want to know, and maybe you guys can unmute yourselves, if you guys can think of other drugs that are prescribed for medical purposes but are also dangerous.
Painkillers?
Yes. Yes, that's exactly where I was going. Yes, so opioids, painkillers, those are another prescribed medicine from a licensed doctor, but they can become harmful and addictive, right? We talk about it all the time of opioid abuse, painkiller abuse, everything like that, right? Those also come from a licensed doctor, but if you're not using them correctly, or if you're not being careful, they can become super addictive, and they can become super addictive very fast. And another trend that we are also seeing, it's kind of about 5 years ago, but I mean, it's still a thing too, is over-the-counter cough medicines and allergy medicines. They also have a really addictive property too. So I know that it's an old fad, but like Robotrippin and everything like that, or maybe drinking too much NyQuil, all of these things, they're all medicine in some sort of a way. Same with medical marijuana, but if they're not using it as prescribed, or if they're abusing it, when it comes down to it, it's still going to affect your body. Just like opioids, even if you are using them in the way that you are prescribed and you're not abusing them, they still do have an effect on your body and then on your mind as well too. So legal doesn't always mean safe, right? This was an ad that we helped the Reno Coalition develop, and we talk about, prescription pills and alcohol and marijuana, right? All of these things are legal, but it doesn't mean that they're safe all the time. So we're going to talk about the laws. I think you guys know now that you have to be 21 years of age to purchase any marijuana or CBD product. All purchases, like I said, have to be made at a licensed dispensary. This means that street sales are still illegal and considered drug dealing. So even if you are 21 and you're selling on your own, maybe you're growing on your own and selling on your own, that's still illegal because you're not doing it through a licensed dispensary. There are legal consequences for youth in possession of marijuana. And then there are also legal consequences for adults purchasing products to youth. And like I said, they have a very strict tracking program on that, so they can figure out the adults who are passing it down to youth. So any cannabis product that contains any form of THC must only be sold in licensed dispensaries. Dispensaries must be 1,000 feet away from any private or public school and must be 300 feet away from any community center. So if you guys will notice, we do have 2 dispensaries in Carson City. And the way that they are placed, they meet these guidelines of 300 feet away and then 1,000 feet away from any public school. And those were the only 2 locations that those dispensaries had in Carson City because of the way the school district is laid out and where the community centers are. CBD products may be sold at convenience stores or gas stations as long as they contain 0% THC. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but some stores might carry CBD products. Again, you would have to be 21 to purchase them, even if they are at a gas station, convenience store, everything like that. And like vape juice, some CBD is falsely marketed. So they are testing some of the CBD products out right now because some might contain like 0.1% or 0.01% of THC. If that's the case, it would have to be sold in a dispensary. But most CBD products are gonna contain 0% THC, and you still have to be 21, even if they're not at a dispensary. So for a recap of it all, so cannabis is a blanket term for all marijuana and hemp products. Marijuana is an addictive drug that can cause both physical and psychological effects. The concentration of THC in marijuana has continued to increase in the past 40 years. While Nevada has legalized recreational and medical marijuana, it is still federally illegal. You must be 21 to purchase marijuana products and cannabis products. And there are serious consequences for being in possession of marijuana underage. So I want to leave you guys with a couple different resources. So us here at Partnership Carson City, we're a great resource, and our website is a great resource as well too. We have an entire youth page. So if you're ever curious on maybe it's not marijuana, but any other sort of drug, maybe it's mental health, anything like that, we're here for you. And we're also located in town across the street from the McDonald's on Winnie. You guys can stop in any time if you need resources or anything like that, maybe just someone to talk to. And then we have SAMHSA. I always forget the acronym for this, but this one is a national resource, and they have everything on every sort of drug, mental health, everything. So they have a number, that 1-800-662-HELP, but they also have a website. If you just Google SAMHSA, you'll see it pop up, and they have a ton of great knowledge on there. And then I did also list Community Counseling Center and Serenity Mental Health. So if you find yourself ever needing drug and alcohol counseling, or maybe a friend might, or family member, anything like that, or maybe, you know, you were using and you want to stop. These are 2 different great counseling centers in town that do drug and alcohol counseling, and they also have very cheap rates, if not completely free. And then also myself, I'm a certified drug and alcohol counselor. So you can also use me as a resource if you ever did need drug and alcohol counseling. And then I wanted to leave you guys with informational resources if you guys have any other questions after this presentation or in the future. But a lot of the information I got tonight was from NIDA, which is the National Institute on Drug Abuse. They have amazing information, especially if you ever need to use any of it for school. It's all credited, it's all has a million different sources. They have a million different studies. They even have a NIDA for teens if you want something a little bit more youth and trendy. They have that as well too. Amazing resources. Again, the SAMHSA website, cdc.gov. they have a lot of stuff on every sort of drug as well. And then again, our website here as well too. So I want to open it up now to any questions if you guys do have any questions.
I just wanted to interject on that. We've been doing a lot of things with the Partnership Carson City website. Like they've been doing a lot of research on marijuana on that website and using that as a valid and reliable resource because that's one of our state standards. So they're very familiar with that website.
Good, 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 good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I just want to say one more thing too. So the SAMHSA website is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Is what SAMHSA.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you guys, that was really good information from Samantha. And I told you she was young and fun and really knew a lot about marijuana and would do a really good job tonight. So I know some of you might still have questions. If you do, unmute yourself and then ask them. Don't be scared to ask questions.
That's what I'm here for. Not a single one. I am surprised. Usually you guys love this topic and I feel like there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Maybe I already covered them all.
Yeah, maybe you did such a good job. No one has a question. You know, it's really honestly the sign of the times because in class they don't ask questions either. So don't be offended.
Well, if you guys ever do have questions or anything, or you just want to know more about maybe like youth clubs or how you can maybe get involved or any sort of activities or whatever, my email is written right there. So you guys can feel free to email me. I can answer any questions for you, how to get involved, anything like that. Let's see.
Samantha,
oh, okay.
Do you want to maybe highlight the youth camp that's coming up? I've been telling my classes about it. It's posted in my Google Classroom, but I know I've handed a few of these kids out some of the registration forms. Do you want to tell them about it?
Yeah, I do. I actually just got a question from Jaden, so I'm going to answer that first.
Okay, sorry.
And then, no, you're fine. So he said his microphone doesn't work, but he has a really good question. He said, why can people still get in trouble even if it's legal? That's a great question. So typically most of the time there's a couple different things. So there are laws and mandates in Nevada on how much you can possess or buy at one time. I believe that amount is an ounce. So if you are caught with more than an ounce, even if it is legal, that is still a crime. So that is one way that they can get in trouble is if they have more than that amount. Another reason is maybe if they already had a run-in with the crime or if they already had a run-in with the law. So maybe they're on probation, maybe they are on like house arrest, anything like that, or where they shouldn't be using or shouldn't even be in possession. That could be another reason why. I know that there's also situations where maybe a teen is on probation and there's not allowed to be alcohol or marijuana in the house, but the parent still has it. That could be another reason why they could get in trouble because they're not even supposed to have it. You know, there's so many different ways that people can still get in trouble, even if it's legal. And I know it seems like, you know, why make it legal if people can still get in trouble? But I think that they've made a lot of rules and they've made a lot of leniency on it too, that, you know, you can still have an ounce, which is a lot of marijuana to have at one time. You know, there's no limit on how many times you could go back to a dispensary in a week or a month. They just put limits on how much you can buy at one time or in a week. And so I think just people kind of pressing their luck with all of that is probably the main reason why people still get in trouble. It's a good question. But yeah, if you guys want to think of any questions, I'll quickly talk about my youth summit that we are planning. So Diana and I usually plan every year a in-person summer camp in Lake Tahoe. Our last one was in 2019. It was super fun, slept in cabins, campfires. It was fantastic. But since we can't do that with COVID this year, we're going to do a hybrid model. So we are going to have 2 amazing keynote speakers from Missouri and Arizona. They're going to Zoom in and just get you guys hyped up and everything. And then we're going to be hosting it here in Carson City. So we provide breakfast, lunch. We're going to be doing activities. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of fun, different stuff, maybe like tie-dye stuff. There'll be snacks, there'll be music, dance parties, like there'll just be a whole lot of stuff. So it's going to be May 15th and 16th. It's a Saturday and a Sunday. And I know that sounds tough, but I promise that we're going to make it worthwhile. And we're not going to sit you down like a classroom in 8 hours. We're going to have fun. We're going to interact, and it's for all Carson City kids. So it's completely free. You guys can bring your friends. All you have to do is sign up. And you can use our website to sign up, or I know Miss Bean has ways of how you can sign up too. But basically all you have to do is sign up and show up, and we'll feed you and give you fun times. Anything I missed, Diana?
Food. There'll be food there.
And we provide good food, so we're not just gonna be
snacks.
Yeah. So.
And they get goodie bags. Don't forget the goodie bags.
Oh yeah, t-shirts, like backpacks, like a whole bunch of stuff. So it's literally free. You just have to sign up, and you just come and you get free stuff and free food, and
Fun.
That's it. Yeah.
Good time.
Yeah.
Hey Sam, to piggyback off your the question you answered, it's even though it's legal, you can also get in trouble because, like, if you think about it, like, you guys can't, if someone who is 21 smokes in public, like, you can't do that. So you'd also get in trouble for that. So think about things like that too. Even though some things are like legal, it's kind of like same thing with like alcohol. You can't drink like alcohol, like you know, like in a public area, I guess, like if it's not like allowed. So just think about it like that too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that's a good point. Anybody else?
All right, hearing no other questions. If you want to, you can private chat or send Samantha a message, or you can send me a message on your chat. You can do that privately, and we'll get your questions answered. But I want to thank Partnership Carson City again for having and hosting all these family engagement series. It's really a way to provide you guys with extended learning from professionals and experts in the field. And also those resources are valuable as well. So I'd like to thank Diana and Samantha with Partnership Carson City for being here tonight. And then I would also like to remind you that next Thursday, 6 p.m., same link, we will be hosting Heather. And she is out of Las Vegas, and she's like the real true life story of a heroin addict who has turned her life into a success. So that'll be a good one too, just seeing the positive side of, you know, using these resources effectively and getting help when you need it. So she's a success story, and she'll be really good sharing kind of a realistic story of her own. So I'd like to invite you to all that as well. If you want to get that registration for that May youth camp, I have those on my desk at school too. So it's also posted in Google Classroom. So next Thursday, same time, same place.
Right. Well, thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks for coming.
Right. Have a good night, everyone.
Yep. Be safe. Bye.
Thank you.